The past seems alive today, with everyone claiming to have relatives who took part in that first crusade. One old man even told me he was born on the march and personally blessed by Peter the Hermit.
But how many people do you think really went on that first crusade?
10 to 20,000, possibly a bit more in the armies of the feudal lords. It's more difficult to estimate how many marched with Peter the Hermit since so many died early on. Perhaps another 100,000, though some say twice that number.
Ciboletto, thank you. There were not many soldiers among the men, women, and children of the People's Crusade, yet they set out in winter without supplies to travel 2,000 miles to Palestine, trusting God to get them there safely. More than half died, but the survivors made their way to Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire of Byzantium. That was the staging ground from which the assault on Palestine would begin. Louis de Hine has the story.
40,000 or more of the People's Crusade eventually left here and crossed into Asia on boats provided by the emperor. Sadly, their faith was no substitute for military skill. The Muslim leader decided these ragged invaders needed a lesson. He attacked, and barely 1 in 20 survived. Although Peter himself escaped, the People's Crusade was over. Yet that massacre ensured the ultimate victory for the Crusaders. The Muslim leader was preoccupied with the constant feuding among his own people. He ignored the Western armies, assuming them to be as weak as the peasant rabble. It was his first and worst mistake.
Allah punishes us for our arrogance. Nothing we do can harm those iron knights. Arrows bounce off them, swords blunt on their armor. They are invincible.
Antioch fell, and the other major cities. The Turks realized their danger and fought back. Wells were filled or poisoned. The countryside is stripped of anything that might support the army of God. Desperation drove the Crusaders on. There could be no retreat, and as month followed month, they pushed closer to Jerusalem. With every victory, the myth of their invincibility grew stronger among their Muslim enemies. Yet, the Crusaders themselves were sick, exhausted, and starving.
God leads us on to victory. Hunger of the body is nothing when the soul is filled.
We need food, not prayers. Heavenly grace. It's hard to ration and serve for dinner.
We know the Christians are starving, but there are terrible rumors. At Marra, it said they ate human flesh. Children were roasted on cooking fires. How can Allah permit such men to live?
Soldiers aren't saints, and this has been a rough campaign. There have been savage acts on both sides. But eating human flesh, no Christian would commit such an act.
True or not, the stories of atrocities help the Crusaders' cause. The whole country is terrified of them. Some of the knights are civilized enough, if anyone from the West can be called civilized. But the common soldiers, they're just wild animals. They don't understand we're Christian too.
The Christian army finally reached Jerusalem's walls almost 4 years since Pope Urban first called for a holy war in Palestine. The siege would continue for 40 days.
That was Louis de Hine in Constantinople. 88 years ago, when that siege ended, Christian forces ran wild. And today, residents in Jerusalem are terrified that Saladin will retaliate for the way the Crusaders acted. They butchered Jerusalem's citizens, some of them Eastern Christians who were mistaken for Muslims or Jews. But it was the Jews who suffered most, herded into their synagogue, which was then set on fire. By the end of the night, the Jewish population of Jerusalem no longer existed. As their men rampaged through the holy city, the 5 Christian leaders prayed at one of Christendom's most sacred shrines, the Holy Sepulchre. They chose Godfrey de Bouillon as their ruler.
I am honored that in Jerusalem only Christ can be king. I'll be his defender of the Holy Sepulchre.
Now, 9 decades later, Jerusalem is back in Muslim hands, and it's a Muslim leader, Saladin, who holds the Holy Sepulchre. We're now getting late word of a breakthrough in the surrender negotiations. Salim Karasi is in the Muslim camp. Salim?
In the last few moments, Count BALIAN has formally offered up Jerusalem to Sultan Saladin. We don't know the details of the deal yet, but... My lords, what's going to happen to the people of Jerusalem?
As of dusk tonight, all Christian resistance to the Sultan's army will formally end. The citizens of Jerusalem will be spared on payment of a ransom. 10 dinars for a man, 5 for a woman, 1 for a child. The Sultan has also graciously agreed to accept a ransom of 100,000 dinars for 20,000 of the poor, who would otherwise be taken into slavery.
My troops will not occupy the city until the money has been collected. There will be no looting, no more killing. The world will know we act with mercy and justice according to the laws of the Prophet.
Count BALIAN! Count BALIAN, what about the 100,000 dinars?
I promise before God, we will raise the money for the poor.
What will this surrender mean for the residents of Jerusalem and for the other Crusader states in Palestine? We'll have that story when we come back.
My love is like a blood-red rose, softer than petals dipped in dew.
It's the horticultural event of the season, the rose. Until recently unknown in Europe, but now available for your pleasure to grow in your own garden. From Frascati and Sons, Venetian traders for the Holy Land and beyond. But hurry, with demand like this,
Love me.
Supplies won't last long.
For the residents of Jerusalem, life now has a price. Saladin is demanding a ransom for each of the city's residents, and for the more than 30,000 people who live in Jerusalem, their only thoughts are on how to get that money. Owen of CANARFON is in Jerusalem. Owen?
Well, Saladin has quickly sealed off the city, and anyone trying to escape is arrested. But those who can afford to pay a ransom are being allowed out. Now, the ransom for peasants is 10 dinars, which to them is the equivalent of 6 months' salary, an amount which most of them will find impossible to pay.
Obviously, Owen, some people don't have much faith in Count BALIAN's promise to raise the ransom.
Yes, well, certainly that's the biggest concern. The Patriarch has said he has no intention of wasting his own money. And even the Knights Templar, the sworn defenders of the pilgrim routes, even they aren't willing to help.
Thanks, Owen. Earlier today, timeline crews were in Tyre, the most important coastal city still under Crusader control. This is what they found. Sailors charging refugees 10 times the normal rate. Now, most of these people have been fleeing from city to city, always just one step ahead of the Muslim advance. Now, there's nowhere else to run.
The whole thing is ridiculous. Saladin doesn't want to interrupt the European trade. It's too important. But these sailors are just plain greedy. They are making quick profit from refugees, while 6 months of trade rots here in the sun.
I'm from the little town of BEIRUT, north of Paris. But I've made the pilgrimage. I've seen where our Lord Jesus lived and died. No one can take that away from me.
Reinforcements already are arriving, possibly in time to prevent Saladin's total victory over the Crusader states. However, refugees want out at any cost, and they fight to get on board ships, which will now be returning to Europe.
Saladin will find Tyre a tougher nut to crack than he thinks. Once he loses momentum, we can have sufficient troops to mount a counterattack. This isn't the end of Christian Palestine. You can count on that.
The scene now is very different in Jerusalem, which has quieted down after one of the most tumultuous days in its history. Salim Karasi is in the Holy City with the Muslim leader Saladin.
I'm outside the Mosque of Al-Aqsa, the holiest shrine of Islam within the walls